There are people who seem completely normal until they realize someone is starting to notice them. Just a little. A gaze that lingers slightly too long. Someone truly looking at them while they speak. And almost immediately, everything in their body begins to shift a little. Some people suddenly forget where to put their hands. Some people are walking completely naturally. Then, the moment they know someone is watching, they suddenly cannot walk normally anymore. It sounds funny. But in that moment, it is not funny at all. There are people who are talking. Then suddenly, in the middle of a sentence, they hear their own voice. They hear the way they laugh. They hear their own existence in that room. And from that moment on, they are no longer inside the conversation. A part of them gets pulled out. Standing somewhere behind them. Watching. Am I being weird? Did I just say something stupid? Does that person think I'm annoying? The most exhausting part is, the person in front of them usually has no idea this is happening. On the outside, they are still smiling. Still responding at the right moments. Still looking completely normal. But inside, their mind has already started spiraling. There are people who replay one sentence they said all night. Just because the other person went quiet for a little too long afterward. Or changed their tone so slightly that no one else would even notice. But their body noticed. Very quickly. There are nights when they open an old conversation again. Reading every line very slowly. Trying to find the exact moment the atmosphere began to change. And the ugliest part is, most of them know they are overthinking. They know. But they still cannot stop. There are people who post a story, then regret it a few minutes later. Not because they posted anything wrong, but because now other people have seen them. They have had thoughts about them. And that alone is enough to make them want to disappear. Some people even feel relieved when someone cancels plans at the last minute. A relief in the chest. Like they have just escaped something that had been making them tense for hours. Not because they hate people. In fact, many people like this crave connection deeply. They like the feeling of being understood. They like deep conversations. It is just that. The longer they are noticed, the more they start to feel like they are no longer themselves. And there is one very uncomfortable truth here. Some people are not afraid of attention. They are afraid of the feeling that they become wrong under someone else's gaze. There are people who live for a very long time with the feeling that only when no one is paying attention to them can their body truly relax. And the saddest part is, so many people think this is just their personality. When maybe they have simply never truly felt that being seen is safe. If you have ever felt yourself becoming unnatural just because you knew someone was looking at you, leave a dot in the comments. Sometimes the thing that makes someone feel a little lighter is simply knowing there is still someone who understands exactly what that feels like. And what many people do not realize is, that kind of tension usually does not begin in the present. It is much older than that. There are people who grew up in rooms where their emotions were always watched too closely. What's wrong with your face? Why are you so sensitive? You're sad over something that small? It sounds minor. But some sentences stay inside a person for a very long time. There are people who, from childhood, became used to adjusting themselves before anyone else had the chance to get upset. Not to become better. To become safer. To avoid that feeling of the whole atmosphere suddenly changing after they had just said something. And then, little by little, they no longer simply lived. They began monitoring their own reactions. There are children who are very well behaved. So well behaved they almost never bother anyone. It sounds like a good thing. But many times, That is just a child who has become too good at guessing adults' emotions. Knowing when to stay quiet. Knowing when to disappear from the room. Knowing when their face is not right. Some people cannot remember what actually happened in their childhood. They only remember the feeling of always having to pay attention to the atmosphere in the house. Footsteps outside the door. A sigh. The way someone sets a glass down too hard on the table. And the frightening thing is, once the body has become used to living like that, it often does not know how to stop. It follows them into friendships, relationships, even very normal conversations. That is why there are people who are texting, then suddenly sit still, staring at the screen for a very long time. Reading every word again. Deleting everything. Writing it again. Deleting it again. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have just imagined the other person reading it and thinking they are too much. It sounds a little sad. There are people who apologize so quickly it is almost frightening. The other person has not even gotten upset yet, but they already feel guilty. As if their existence is always slightly inconvenient to the world around them. And the most exhausting part is, most of this happens completely automatically. They walk into a room and almost immediately know something about the atmosphere feels off today. Someone is becoming a little distant. Someone does not really want them here. Or maybe nothing has changed at all, but their body still refuses to relax. There are people who come home after meeting others and only then feel unbearably exhausted. Not because the conversation was too long, but because for hours they never truly stopped paying attention to themselves. Never truly rested. And there is a slightly ugly truth here. Many people spend most of their youth becoming the easiest version of themselves to be around. Easy to talk to. Easy to accommodate. To the point where sometimes even they no longer know where their real feelings are anymore. The worst part is not when other people judge them. The worst part is the moment they begin looking at themselves through other people's eyes all the time. And from then on, even when they are alone, they still feel something inside them that refuses to fully settle down. If you have ever felt like you always had to read the room before you were allowed to be yourself, leave a dot in the comments. There are people who have lived for so long in a state of having to guess other people's emotions that they have forgotten what it feels like to exist naturally. And maybe the thing that exhausts people like this the most is not other people. It is the feeling of having to constantly monitor themselves when they are around others. There are people who have never truly sat still inside a conversation. On the outside, they have. But inside, their mind has never stopped running. Some people are listening to someone else tell a story, while at the same time still noticing what their face looks like, whether they are reacting enough, whether they are being too quiet, whether they look weird. And the exhausting part is, everything happens at once, constantly, with no pause. There are people who only need to be looked at for a few seconds too long and suddenly forget what they were about to say. Completely blank. And right in that moment, they start feeling ashamed of their own awkwardness. Some people are laughing, then suddenly feel uncomfortable because their laugh sounds too loud. Some people are eating with friends, then suddenly no longer know how to chew naturally. It sounds absurd. But if you have lived like this long enough, you understand that kind of exhaustion. It is the kind of tiredness no one can see. There are people who come home after spending time with others, and the first thing they do is lie completely still. No lights on. Not wanting to say anything else. As if their body has just had to hold a role for too long. And the funny thing is, most people around them will think they are just introverted. No one sees the hundreds of moments of self-monitoring that happened inside their head throughout the entire evening. There are people who walk into a coffee shop, and the first thing they do is not look for a seat. It is checking whether anyone is looking at them. Some people open the front camera, not to fix their hair, but to mentally prepare themselves to see their own face before other people see it. There are people who delete a very beautiful photo just because they thought for too long about how other people would feel when looking at it. That is the kind of life that slowly makes a person lose connection with themselves, because too much energy has been spent becoming the okay version in other people's eyes. There are people who no longer really know what they like anymore. They only know what will make them less noticeable. It hurts to hear, but many people live for a very long time in the state of being invisible is easier to breathe through than being seen too closely. And then it starts affecting even the smallest things. Some people take hours just to reply to a simple message. Writing, reading it again, adjusting the tone, deleting one sentence because they are afraid it sounds needy, adding an emoji, then deleting the emoji because they are afraid it looks like they are trying too hard. In the end, they do not send it at all. There are people who want to be loved very much. Very much. But the moment someone truly starts paying attention to them, they begin wanting to step back. Not because their feelings are gone, but because closeness makes them feel like they are being seen too clearly. And that is the most painful contradiction. Wanting connection, but feeling suffocated when connection actually happens. There are people who, their whole life, have only wanted one very small feeling: to be around someone, without having to constantly edit themselves, without monitoring the way they laugh, without thinking too much after every sentence, without suddenly feeling ashamed because they existed too clearly for a few minutes. And maybe the loneliest thing is, so many people like this look completely normal from the outside. They are cheerful, easy to talk to. They may even be very attentive to other people's emotions. It is just that no one knows. Behind every normal interaction, there is a person who has never truly relaxed completely. Maybe that is also why some people disappear for a long time after they feel they have been seen too much. Not because they do not need anyone, but because sometimes being seen too clearly really makes them so tired that they want to disappear from the world for a few days. And then, after a very long time living like that, many people begin learning how to make themselves smaller. No one tells them directly that they have to do it, but their body understands on its own. The less attention they draw, the lower the risk of making someone upset and causing them to leave. So they slowly become the kind of person who is very easy. Anything is fine. It's okay. Whatever everyone wants. It sounds gentle. Until you realize. So many times, they stay silent not because they are okay, but because they have become too used to swallowing their feelings down before those feelings can fully appear. There are people who feel sad and immediately start feeling guilty for making the atmosphere heavier. Some people want to tell a very honest story. Then suddenly, halfway through, they smile lightly. Ah, never mind. It's nothing. And that moment always hurts a little. Because you can feel it. They have just erased themselves right in front of you. There are people who edit a message for almost an hour. Writing. Deleting. Writing again. Changing a period into an emoji because they are afraid they sound too cold. Then deleting the emoji because they are afraid it looks like they are trying too hard. In the end, they do not send it at all. It sounds exhausting. But many people live like this every day. Some people open their phone in the middle of the night just to reread an old conversation. Not because they miss it, but because they suddenly feel ashamed that they replied too quickly, too honestly, too exposed. And the weirdest thing is, They are often the ones who are very good at caring about other people. Very quick to notice when the other person's mood has shifted. They know who is sad. They know who is trying to pretend they are normal. They know when the atmosphere begins to tilt a little. It is just that. When someone turns to them and asks, "What about you?" they stay silent for a very long time. As if their mind suddenly goes blank. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they are not used to their own feelings being held long enough to exist. It hurts to hear. But there are people who live for a very long time with the feeling that the less complicated they are, the lower the risk of being left behind. At least, that is what their body has learned. Some people even feel uncomfortable when someone treats them well for too long. Not because they do not want to be loved, but because they are not used to the feeling of being kept, without having to become easy to be around. That is the ugliest part. When a person begins to believe that, to be loved, they have to become a little smaller, a little less emotional, a little less troublesome, until one day, they look back and no longer know which version was ever really them. There are people who spend so much time around others that they no longer remember what they look like when they are not constantly adjusting themselves to fit someone else. And that kind of loneliness is very quiet. No one sees it. No one thinks a sweet, understanding, mature person could be that tired. Until they disappear from everything for a very long time. Then come back as if nothing ever happened. But the truth is, some parts of them have been tired for a very long time. And maybe the thing that exhausts people like this the most is not being hated by other people. It is that they have never truly felt safe being seen too clearly. There are people who enter a relationship, but one part of them has never truly relaxed. Everything may still be completely fine. The other person is still gentle, still texting like normal, still loving them. But all it takes is one silence that lasts a little too long, and their mind has already gone very far. Some people are lying next to the person they love, but still secretly noticing whether that person held them less than usual today, whether their tone sounded different, why this message feels so short. Sometimes they are laughing completely normally, then suddenly feel a chill through their body just because the other person replied a little slower than usual. It hurts to hear. Because many people like this have never truly experienced love without vigilance attached to it. They are loved, while at the same time quietly preparing themselves to lose that love. And the most exhausting part is, most other people will never see that battle. On the outside, they still look very normal. Still smiling. Still talking. Still posting photos together. But inside, there are people who have never truly stopped watching for signs that someone is about to leave. Some people, just because their partner replies slower than usual, cannot do anything else for the entire evening. Some people read the same message again and again, just to check whether the period at the end of the sentence feels colder today. It sounds irrational, but their body does not respond to logic. It responds to memory. To the times when everything changed without warning. And then, little by little, that takes away their ability to be present in the most beautiful moments. There are people who are being loved, but still cannot feel it completely. Because one part of them is still busy preparing for the moment that love disappears. That is a very painful contradiction. Wanting to be very close to someone, but the closer they get, the more afraid they begin to feel. There are people who, after being treated kindly for a while, instead of feeling safer, begin to worry even more. Because now, they have something to lose. There are people who have never truly slept peacefully inside a relationship. And maybe that is the loneliness almost no one sees. When a person spends too many years living in a state of having to watch other people's emotions, to the point where even peace makes them feel unsafe. Some people lie in a very quiet room, but their body still refuses to fully settle down, as if they are waiting for something to happen. A change, a distance, a small sign that everything is about to stop being the way it was. And then one day, they begin to understand. Maybe they were never really too sensitive. Maybe they have just lived too long in a state of always preparing themselves for disconnection. It sounds small, but for many people, that is a very big moment. Because for the first time, they no longer see themselves as someone who has a problem, but as someone who has been tired for far too long. And maybe healing for people like this does not begin with forcing themselves to stop overthinking, or trying to become the kind of person who is easier to keep. It begins with very small moments. One time when someone goes silent, and their heart does not automatically sink. One time being next to someone, without constantly watching for the moment they are about to leave. Because maybe what many people are really searching for has never been only love, but the feeling of finally being able to relax, while still being loved. If, during this video, there was any moment that made you feel like someone had just described the feeling you never knew how to name, leave a dot in the comments. There are feelings that only when you hear someone else say them out loud do you realize you have been carrying them alone for far too long.
Click the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. And be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being here. At Cortex Psychology, we explore the hidden patterns beneath human behavior, the thoughts you keep private, the emotions you cannot explain, and the quiet reactions that shape the way you live and connect. Sometimes, understanding yourself begins with hearing your inner world described clearly for the first time. So if this video helped you feel seen, stay with us. You do not have to decode your mind alone. We will decode it together. See you in the next one.